problem now, all right? Not discrimination, not exclusion, not the fact that opportunity in America has never been evenly distributed. No, trying to fix it. Divisive, ineffective. It's single-handedly destroying Western civilization. Hey everyone, welcome back to Justice Redesign. I'm Steve Teskey, your host, retired judge, and this is episode 2. It's titled In Defense of DEI. Now we're in a series about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all the hoopla around it. And so our first episode was broken down into 2 parts and titled Merit Without Memory. Okay. And this one, I title it in the alternative, or why pretending not to see the problem isn't leadership. Okay. So, with that said, apparently DEI is the problem now. All right. Not discrimination, not exclusion, not the fact that opportunity in America has never been evenly distributed. No, trying to fix it. DEI, we're told, is divisive, ineffective, unconstitutional, and somehow also so powerful, it's single-handedly destroying Western civilization, which is impressive, because it can't even survive a state legislature with a grievance and a microphone. Okay, so let's talk about what DEI actually is, and quite frankly, what it's not. So let's clear something up right out of the gate. DEI is not a secret hiring conspiracy. It's not a quota system in a trench coat like many are trying to convince us. And it is not about giving jobs to unqualified people out of guilt. That's not DEI, for God's sakes. That's a Fox News bedtime story. DEI exists for one very boring, very unsexy reason, because human beings are biased. Yeah, we are. And institutions built by humans tend to reward familiarity and punish difference, even when they swear they're being objective. DEI doesn't lower standards. It asks a much more uncomfortable question. Are we actually measuring what we say we value, or just what feels familiar? Reality check number 1 here. If DEI really lowered standards, corporations would have killed it years ago. Not debated it, not rebranded it, killed it. Listen to this.
But some companies chose to stand up to the White House. Shareholders at companies like Levi's, Ben & Jerry's, and Apple stuck to their commitments, rejecting Trump's anti-DEI order. Other companies like Costco and Cisco chose to publicly defend their DEI policies, while others simply decided to continue their diversity efforts.
You see, because CEOs do not run charities, they run spreadsheets. That's why DEI programs continue. And spreadsheets are brutally honest. They don't care about political talking points. They don't watch cable news. They don't respond to vibes. They respond to outcomes. And for decades now, the outcomes have been stubbornly consistent. Homogeneous teams underperform, people who all look like each other. Diverse teams innovate faster. Groupthink is expensive because people who all look alike working together, well, anyway, they tend to think the same way and cannot think diversely and come up with new ideas and innovative ideas. It's very simple. And there are reasons why a diverse workforce and management team outperforms. Okay. In fact, let's look at this. Just to put a number on it, one major McKinsey study found that companies in the top quartile for racial and ethnic diversity were significantly more likely to outperform their peers on profitability. Look, not feel better about themselves, not win a participation trophy, all that, kumbaya, do-gooder type stuff that folks on the right uh, throw at these corporations. No, folks, okay? They outperform their peers on profitability. They make more money using diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. Outperform, like as in more money.
Despite challenges, a 2024 study found 75% of U.S. executives highly prioritize DEI, and those executives are being more vocal about their support. In a letter to shareholders, JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon said that the initiatives are driving inclusivity, innovation, and stronger financial performance. And MasterCard's Chief Administrative Officer acknowledged the company's continued commitment to equality and fairness. Diversity among CEOs is all.
Now, here's the part critics never explain. If DEI were actually discriminatory, if it were truly illegal, if it really exposed companies to massive liability, then why are so many corporations still doing it? Why would companies with armies of lawyers, companies whose entire business model is risk avoidance, then why would they continue DEI efforts despite political pressure, despite hostile rhetoric, despite the threat of EEOC investigations? Well, let me answer that. It's very simple. Because DEI works, not as an ideology, but as a strategy. Corporations are not keeping DEI because they're woke. They're keeping it because abandoning it would be stupid. They know something the critics don't or won't admit. The real risk is not DEI. The real risk is building organizations that can't see talent, can't adapt, and can't compete. Reality check complete here.
Over 70% of leaders choose proteges that are of the same race and gender. We like comfortable, we gravitate to comfortable, but what we have to realize in today's world and tomorrow's future, comfort means stagnation. It means a lack of change, a lack of forward movement.
So if you look around the room and everybody who's sitting there is a white male, and you're trying to sell products to a multiracial world marketplace, and you don't have anybody who represents that thinking, then you're probably not going to do very well in the marketplace.
So let's talk about how the word merit is a fairy tale. You see, critics love the word merit. They say it like it descended from the heavens on a stone tablet. But here's the problem. Merit does not exist in a vacuum. It is developed, it is recognized, it is sponsored, and it is evaluated by people. And people bring bias with them whether they admit it or not. When critics say, just let merit decide, what they usually mean is, let the system keep doing what it's always done. But don't make us look at the outcomes now. That's not meritocracy, folks. That's autopilot. So let's take a look at a particular metaphor. I call it the pie metaphor. So here's how critics think about opportunity. They imagine it as a pie, and their fear is very specific. If someone else gets a slice, mine gets smaller. But opportunity is not a pie. See, it's a kitchen. All right? And DEI isn't taking food off anyone's plate, it's letting more people cook. It turns out when you stop hiring the same guy from the same school with the same resume who golfs with the same people, the food actually gets better. I mean, who knew, right? Here's reality check number 2. No one complains about diversity when it expands markets, increases profits, drives innovation. You see, they complain when it challenges comfort. That's the reality check. Okay. Let's look at how, if DEI is really illegal, okay? All right, because it's not. So let's talk about my favorite argument, and that is that DEI is illegal now. Oh, really? Illegal where? Because the Supreme Court didn't ban diversity. It didn't ban inclusion, okay? What it banned was lazy, race-based shortcuts in admissions, okay? And somehow that turned into, pack it up, everybody, history's over. You see, folks, Title VII still exists. Anti-discrimination laws still exist. Race-conscious strategies that are lawful still exist. Doesn't matter how many executive orders that President Trump signs saying that this is illegal, that's not, it doesn't trump, no pun intended, the Supreme Court. What doesn't exist is a constitutional right to never feel uncomfortable at work. None of that's changing. Okay? Now, let me slow this down for a moment, because this is where some listeners assume I'm dodging, and I'm not. Some DEI programs are not just ineffective, they're counterproductive. Programs that rely on one-off mandatory trainings, programs that shame instead of explain, programs that substitute slogans for structure, programs that have no metrics, no accountability, and no follow-up. That stuff doesn't change institutions, it breeds cynicism. I know this stuff. I have spent 22 years and more in programming and developing evidence-based programming, and all those characteristics I just described are killers in terms of programs that should be producing positive outcomes, but they're not going to. And you know what? They're all over the place, because you get these folks who, once something seems like it's really going well, they try to get into it to make money, but they don't do it well. They're just more interested in making the money. Those are those type of people, okay? All right? That stuff doesn't change institutions. It breeds cynicism. And here's the part critics sometimes get right, partly that is. When DEI is reduced to what organizational researchers call diversity theater, it doesn't build trust. It erodes it. When equity work is framed as zero sum, when it sounds like someone has to lose or someone else can win, it triggers resistance instead of understanding. But here's the pivot point critics refuse to make. Bad implementation does not invalidate the principle. If a training program fails, the lesson isn't equity doesn't work. The lesson is that program didn't work. We don't abandon medicine because some treatments are bad. We don't shut down education because some schools fail. And we don't eliminate DEI because some institutions did it lazily or cheaply. What the research actually shows over and over is that DEI works when it's done like real reform. That is, long-term strategy, not one-day workshops. Structural changes, not symbolic gestures. Clear goals, clear metrics, and real accountability. In other words, equity succeeds when it's treated with the same seriousness we demand of every other institutional transformation. And here's the irony. The most harmful DEI programs weren't too ambitious. They were too shallow. The real failure wasn't inclusion. It was pretending that inclusion could be achieved without doing the work. Now, let me say something critics hate to hear. Some DEI programs are bad. Some are performative. Some are lazy. Some are corporate wallpaper with better fonts. And guess what? That's not an argument to burn the house down. All right? It's an argument to do the work better. You don't abandon medicine because some doctors are bad. You don't ban training because some trainers are incompetent. Okay? Unless the goal was never improvement, but elimination. All right. So let's talk about what this is really about. Here's the part that makes people squirm. The backlash against DEI is not about fairness. It's about status anxiety. It's about what happens when people who were always centered are suddenly asked to share space, power, and voice, and are told gently that neutrality didn't work. Folks, that's not discrimination. That's adjustment. All right? Here. Reality check number 3. Discomfort is not injustice. Being challenged is not being harmed. And losing unearned advantage is not oppression. All right? That's the reality check. Now, let's come back to the real reason that major businesses in this company, Fortune 500 companies, could care less about the anti-DEI and they still continue the effort. And this is the part where, right on cue, the spreadsheet wanders back into the room. Remember the spreadsheet I spoke about earlier? The one that doesn't care about politics. It doesn't have any feelings at all. It doesn't get offended. It's not emotional. That spreadsheet. It's still sitting there, quietly doing math. And it keeps reaching the same boring conclusion. Diverse teams outperform. Homogeneous teams cost more because they underperform. Groupthink tanks innovation. Which is awkward, right? Because no matter how loudly people argue about DEI on television, the spreadsheet just keeps whispering, cool story, still not profitable, still not making me money. DEI is making me money. And here's the thing about spreadsheets. They don't clap, they don't boo, and they don't vote. They just tell you whether your business survives. That's why, even with all the political noise, all the executive orders, most corporations haven't abandoned DEI. Because ideology is optional, folks. Market reality is not.
Did you know that companies with higher diversity levels are 35% more likely to have financial returns above their industry medians? Let's talk about how DEI initiatives are reshaping industries and how you can benefit from them. DEI is not just about fairness, it's a smart business strategy. As organizations focus more on DEI, they are seeing higher levels of innovation and employee satisfaction. Companies are recognizing that a diverse workforce leads to better problem solving and more creative ideas.
And if this is all starting to sound familiar, it should be. Because this is exactly what I talk about later in the series titled the homogeneity tax. When organizations reject diversity, they don't become neutral. They become narrow. They stop seeing talent. They stop hearing dissent. And they stop adapting. Because they don't hear and see and feel those things. And eventually they start paying for it. That's the tax. Not paid in headlines, not paid in press releases, paid in missed ideas. Because you don't have the diversity in the room to share the different thoughts that others in there who all look alike wouldn't have come up with. It's paid in missed ideas, paid in lost markets, paid in innovation that never happens because everyone in the room thinks the same way and congratulates each other for it. You can call that ideology if you want. The spreadsheet calls it a loss. You don't have to like DEI. but if you're running a business, you do have to like math. And once you understand that, the question stops being whether DEI makes people uncomfortable and becomes whether we're willing to let discomfort cost us the future.
They yield better results.
The metrics. What would be the right metrics? I mean, if you're looking at it, what were the problems that existed before? What are the right ways to fix it?
Well, some of the challenges that existed before would be, a lack of truly innovative ideas that might be breakthrough. Right? When we're challenged with growth opportunities, we're often told to think bigger. You've got to think bigger. Well, you in and of yourself and your existing team in your existing structure can't think bigger without new perspectives. And that's what leading bigger is widening your perspective by including others.
So how do you do that? I mean, I can think of places that I've worked that would only hire Ivy League graduates, other places that really only hire from 1 or 2 state schools.
Yeah.
We all get comfortable with those pipelines
That's
that
right.
kind of feed in from who we are, what we know. And when you're faced with 1,000 applicants coming in for a job, it's pretty hard to pick out and say, oh, this person's going to be better than that person, other than, hey, I know this person who knows this person, and they've given me a good review of that person, so I'm going to take a flyer on that. How do you get past that?
Yeah, well, I think we all have to realize that, leaders, over 70% of leaders choose proteges that are of the same race and gender, right? Yeah. And it gets to your point of we like comfortable, we gravitate to comfortable, but what we have to realize in today's world and tomorrow's future, comfort means stagnation. It means a lack of change, a lack of forward movement. To the earlier conversation about metrics, and these are some of the things that I cite in my book, an example Harvard Business Review study, and these are some of the sample metrics around the power of inclusion and inclusive workplaces. You've got over 70% more likelihood to generate revenue from innovation revenue, which is new products and services revenue. You have 70% more likelihood to capture new markets. You have a higher level of team performance. You have a higher level of collaboration. And importantly, given how critical talent is today, you have a much lower risk of attrition.
Okay. DEI exists because neutrality failed, because pretending not to see inequality didn't make it disappear. It made it permanent. Abandoning DEI won't restore merit. It will restore comfort for the people who were already comfortable. And if that's the vision of fairness being offered, we should at least have the honesty to call it what it is. Not justice, not neutrality, but fear. Wearing the costume of principle. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. And until next time, everyone, take care and be safe.